Let's talk about sources of ATP. ATP is a molecule necessary as an energy as fuel for muscle contraction. And to produce ATP, there are several ways. One of them is cellular respiration. Please let's remember what it is. So, glucose and oxygen, that's what our muscles take. And those two substances go through a lot of change, through many chemical reactions, and at the end they produce carbon dioxide, water, and ATP molecules. So cellular respiration. Our cells, muscle cells, always have storage of oxygen in special protein attached to special protein called myoglobin. That myoglobin gives muscles that red color. And also glucose. Glucose is stored inside of the muscles in special vesicles called glycosomes. So ATP is the only source that can be used for muscle contraction. And normally there is some storage of ATP in the muscle cell, but it will be depleted in a few seconds after you start using that muscle. What happens? ATP molecule that has 3 phosphate groups breaks away one of the phosphate group, and that breaking of the covalent bonds releases energy used for muscle contraction. ADP later will be restored back to ATP and will be reused again. So how ATP can be regenerated? We just mentioned one way, aerobic respiration, using oxygen and glucose to produce ATP. But in our muscles, there are 2 other ways to create energy, ATP. That is phosphorylation of ADP by creatine phosphate. It means, let's go back for a second, that ADP molecule that has only 2 phosphate group will be restored back to ATP using a molecule called creatine phosphate. Next, an anaerobic pathway using glucose without oxygen to produce ATP. Let's talk about each of them. So first, ATP is created from creatine phosphate for about 15 seconds. That's how long it takes to make ATP out of ADP using creatine phosphate. Very fast, 15 seconds, but not very efficient way to create energy. Only 1 molecule of ATP will be made using 1 molecule of creatine phosphate. No oxygen is used for this way. Second, here it is, glycolysis. We take in a molecule of glucose and produce 2 molecules of ATP. So it's more efficient. 2 molecules. It's a little bit slower, it takes about 1 minute, and also lactic acid will be produced. What does that mean? It means when we are overusing our muscles, when we exercise a lot, that building of lactic acid will cause symptoms like burning feeling in the muscles, sometimes even cramps and weakness and feeling exhausted. That is called lactic acidosis. Finally, the third way, here it is. Oxygen plus glucose inside of our mitochondria, and we receive carbon dioxide, water, and plenty of ATP molecules. On average, it would be 32, but that amount may vary. And 95% of ATP is produced by this aerobic pathway or aerobic respiration. What is downside of this efficient way? It takes hours. I recommend you to fill in this table, so then you will have exactly the table with all the information you need to know about muscle contraction. Let's do it together for one of them. For example, glycolysis. What will be energy source? Glucose. Will oxygen be used? No. What products will be produced? ATP. How much? 2 molecules. Will lactic acid be produced? Yes. And how much will it take to produce energy? 1 minute. Please write it down. Write down for creatine phosphate, also for aerobic respiration, and memorize. And that table is everything you need to know for your exam about energy. Now, one more thing for this chapter: relaxation of a skeletal muscle. How it happens, what causes muscle to relax. When we are not planning to use our muscle for a while, electrical signals are not arriving anymore, and neurotransmitter acetylcholine stops being produced into synaptic cleft. If there is no stimulation from action potential, calcium goes back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum, goes the other way. If there is no calcium for actin, the binding sites of actin will be covered with troponin and tropomyosin again, and formation of connection between myosin heads and actin, cross bridges, is not possible. It means muscle cannot contract anymore and it relaxes.